Hi, everyone. Welcome. If you're here to learn about turtles, you're in the right place. We still have a few minutes until we will officially get started, so feel free to settle in. And those of you who've come to some of the Harris Center Zooms in the past know that we always love to hear where you're zooming in from. So if you are so inclined, you could share in the chat where you're zooming from and maybe your we were talking about this earlier. Maybe your favorite turtle. That might be a really hard question to answer. But if you have a favorite turtle species or recent turtle sighting that you'd like to share, we would love to hear it while we're waiting for everyone to join us. Landings, turtles. Oh, Drew. Hi, Drew. Spotteds. Yeah, Donatello. We didn't specify which kind of turtle we meant, so that's a good one. Welcome all. Welcome to everyone who's just joining us. We'll get started in just a minute or two just to give folks time to join. And if you're just joining, feel free to put in the chat where you're zooming in from. And if you have a favorite turtle, we'd love to hear it. Baby snapping turtles. What about when they get big? I like them all. My favorite turtle is Mr. Fitzy, a huge snapper that lives in the water adjacent to our property in Fitzwilliam. That's good. That's great. Thanks, Liz. Let's see what time. We got another. Give it one more minute. Mr. Fitzy already has a fan club in the chat. That's great. Well, maybe while folks are still settling in and signing in, um, I will start with some Zoom reminders while people are getting settled, and then we can do some welcomes and introductions. But I'm Brett Thielen with the Harris Center for Conservation Education, and we're one of the organizations sponsoring tonight's Zoom, along with the Cheshire County Conservation District, New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions, Fish and Game, DES, and Moosewood. There's lots of partners on this talk and the project we're going to talk about. But for those of you who haven't been on a Zoom in a while, just a few reminders to hopefully help have a seamless Zoom experience. We are recording this talk and we'll be posting it to YouTube. So if you, for those folks who couldn't make it tonight or who have to leave early or just want to watch again. So if you do not want to appear in the video, or if you've got some slow internet speeds happening at your house and are having a hard time with the video, you can just turn your video off and then you won't appear in the YouTube. And that also can help with slow internet speeds. We have closed captioning enabled. You can decide for yourself if you'd like to see those captions. If you look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you might see a box with a CC in it, or you might see three dots that say more, and you can choose to either show or hide subtitles. And the other thing is that we asked if you have any questions to put them in the chat, and a few of us will be keeping an eye on the chat. And then if there's time at the end, we will share those questions with Josh. So did I miss anything, Susie, about our Zoom? Okay. So with that, I'll just say we'll do a few welcomes and introductions. As I said, I'm Brett Thielen with the Harris Center, and we've got a few other folks here tonight that are part of this new Cheshire County Turtle Initiative. Susie, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Spickle, Community Programs Director at the Harris Center, and I love turtles.
And Benet.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar and new faces. My name's Benet Hershon. I'm the district manager at the Cheshire County Conservation District, and we're just so thrilled to be on tonight's call and to be working with such amazing partners throughout the state. And I know Brett is going to go more in depth about the scope of this project, and we're really just thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Josh, do you want to? So I'll give a little intro to this. Tonight's talk is the kickoff event for a really exciting new turtle conservation initiative here in Cheshire County. And so we wanted to share just a little bit about that. And Josh is going to get into more of that during his talk as well. Um, I muted myself. Thank you for asking me to unmute. I was just talking on and on. Thank you very much. Anyway, tonight is the kickoff event for a really exciting turtle conservation initiative that is in the works with many partners here in Cheshire County and throughout the Monadnock region. So I'm going to share just a few words about that before we get to the main event, which is Josh's talk. But Josh, if you could go to our next slide. So, as some of you probably know, turtles face many threats, including habitat loss, roads, poaching for the pet trade, and other climate-related impacts on their habitats. And so there are already some really great research initiatives underway and conservation initiatives underway throughout the state and throughout the Northeast. But there is a data gap for turtle populations here in the Monadnock region. And so this new project that we're launching with tonight's talk is aiming to address that gap. You can go to the next one, Josh, if you would. So this Monadnock Region Turtle Conservation Initiative is many partners all coming together. All of us love turtles and want to help protect turtles. So as we said, it's the Harris Center, it's the Cheshire County Conservation District, it's the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions, New Hampshire DES, New Hampshire Fish and Game, the Natural Resources Conservation Services, and it's all funded with a moose plate grant. So any of you who have a moose plate, you helped make this happen, so thank you. And our goals, we have a few of them. One is to start looking at places where wetlands and roads intersect and to try to assess which places are the most dangerous spots in our region for turtles who need to cross roads. And then the ultimate goal there is to prioritize key sites where we could make improvements to help reduce turtle roadkill. And one other really important partner I forgot to mention who's doing a lot of that work is Moosewood Ecological. We also hope to increase turtle reports from the community, that's all of you, to New Hampshire Fish and Game's Reptile and Amphibian reporting program because they can't help protect turtles unless they know where they are and where they're facing threats. And so I'm sure Josh is going to talk a bit about that tonight. And then a big picture goal is to grow support for turtle conservation to help increase turtle literacy, as Susie once said, throughout our region, and just to help people become aware of what turtles need and how we can help them. And so we have a few things planned. We can go to the next one, Josh. Ways that you can get involved. This is the kickoff event. As I mentioned, we have a number of other workshops, all free of charge, coming up. The next one I do want to mention because it's just 3 weeks from now. It's also a Zoom. It's on May 13th, and I'm really excited for that one. It's with New Hampshire Turtle Rescue. They are turtle rehabilitators who help heal sick and injured turtles, and they're based closer to the seacoast. And so one of the first things that injured turtles need is to get to their care. And so they have a network of turtle transport volunteers that really could use some growing here in the Monadnock region. So on May 13th, we're going to have a volunteer training with New Hampshire Turtle Rescue for anyone who wants to be a turtle hero and volunteer to transport injured turtles to them. We also have plans for, in September, a live turtle in-person event at the Keene Public Library. So stay tuned for information about that. Will there also be opportunities to talk? I think Josh might share about this a little bit as well. There's funding available for people who own or manage land to support turtle conservation on your land through the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. And again, as I mentioned, we're really hoping to start filling in all the gaps in the reptile and amphibian reporting program so that all the turtles that we know of and see around here can be part of Fish and Game's conservation planning. So more on all of that to come, but that's our goal for the next 2 years for this project. And so we hope you'll join us for all of it. And now we get to the main event, which I'm really excited for. We all are. We thought that this was the perfect way to start this project, which is a talk with Josh Megyesy, who's the wildlife biologist with New Hampshire Fish and Game's Nongame and Endangered Wildlife Program. He's their turtle specialist. So he has extensive experience monitoring and managing populations of blandings, spotted, wood, and eastern box turtles. He also participates in regional turtle working groups, helps manage the reptile and amphibian reporting program, and works on environmental review projects when they involve potential impacts to state-listed turtle species. So with that, I am really excited to turn it over to Josh, who's going to share about New Hampshire's turtles and how we can all help. So thank you, Josh.
Thanks for having me here and signing up to hear about turtles and conservation efforts and things that you might be able to do. So yeah, my name's Josh Megyesy. I'm a wildlife biologist with the Nongame and Endangered Wildlife Program at the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. I've been working with turtles for over 10 years now. I started working with Blandings turtles and then transitioned to wood turtles, spotted turtles, and then I just bounce around. A lot of my funding comes from federal grants, and so that allows me to do the work of monitoring populations, identifying conservation priority areas, and then actually implementing conservation actions to protect these animals. Let me just make sure things go forward. Good. Okay. It's working. So just a little background on the Nongame program, if you're not familiar. So we are in the wildlife division at New Hampshire Fish and Game. We are basically in charge of managing all the species in New Hampshire that are not hunted or fished for. And so it's 30, right now it's 30 endangered species, 21 threatened species, 62 special concern species, and then thousands of other species that range from birds, mammals, insects, mussels, the list goes on, and then reptiles and amphibians, of course. That endangered and threatened list you can find on our website as a PDF, so you can see all of the wildlife that's on that. So you can put it in the chat if you want, but does anybody know how many species of turtles we have here in New Hampshire? I'll just see if somebody gets it on the first try. See if anybody guessed.
We have guesses ranging so far from 6 to 10, with all points in
Okay.
between, and a 13, an outlier.
All right. All right. Well, you're within the range. So we have seven species of native turtles in New Hampshire. Here is the full list. So we have Blandings turtle, which is our state and endangered species. Eastern box turtle, also state endangered. Spotted turtle, state threatened. Wood turtle, special concern species. Snapping turtle, painted turtle, and musk turtle are not listed. I will touch on some of the other ones that show up from time to time that are not native. But this is the list we're working with, and these are the truly native species in New Hampshire. So while I am going to focus tonight on the state listed species and the at-risk turtles, I always incorporate all the other species as well, because while right now they're considered secure or common species, we never know what's around the corner. And reptile and amphibian populations globally have really declined from a variety of threats that I'll talk about tonight as well. So we don't want to take any of them for granted. The common painted turtle, the state reptile, is, the most common species you'll see out on logs. Sometimes you can see 30 of them this time of year basking on a log. Very common, but as we all know, bats were really common here for a long, long time. And then one day something happened, white nose syndrome, and they disappeared quickly. And now it's in crisis mode. And so again, we never know what's right around the corner, so we want to make sure that we're doing things to protect all of these species under the umbrella while we're doing conservation actions for the target species. So just to get right into it, painted turtles are, again, the most common. They're statewide. They go from the Massachusetts border all the way up to the Canadian border. State reptile. The reason why they're so common is because they can inhabit almost every type of water body in the state. So from lakes and ponds to rivers and streams to wetlands, they'll use vernal pools, farm ponds, wastewater treatment, settling ponds, you name it, they'll be in there. And so again, when you see those turtles out basking, 90% of them or more are going to be painted turtles. And a fun little fact about them is that they're one of the only turtles that will, when they lay their eggs in the spring, they hatch underground in the fall. And those little painted turtle hatchlings will stay in the ground all winter long and then hatch out in the spring around this time of year and then make a run for the nearby water, pond, wetland. And they have special compounds in their bloodstream that allows them to keep from freezing solids, similar to like a wood frog that can freeze pretty much solid and then thaw out in the spring. Musk turtles are probably one of the more rare common species, only because they're mostly in the southern part of the state. They're also known as the stink pot because they have a foul smell that they'll secrete when they're threatened in their cloaca. And they just kind of show up in random places in the state. And so sometimes we'll find them in coves and big lakes like Lake Winnipesaukee. Sometimes we'll find them in slow moving rivers like the Exeter River, or small farm ponds and things like that. Less predictable than some of the other species, but highly aquatic. They rarely come out of the water. They'll come out to nest or, sometimes move to a different wetland, but rarely. And part of the reason for that is on the picture to the right here, you can see the bottom plastron of this turtle is very reduced. And so that shell doesn't protect them from predators that can pick them up and start to chew on them. So they do their best to stay away from terrestrial predators, and so staying in the water is their best defense, and they like to settle down at the bottom and use their camouflage. Snapping turtles are also very common, and you'll see them also anywhere in the state, using a variety of wetlands, lakes, and ponds. They get up to be 40 to 50 pounds. So very large turtle, very powerful jaws that they use for feeding, but they'll also use in defense. If you're ever in a position where you have to move a snapping turtle off of a roadway in the direction that it was headed, you'll notice that they rarely turn their back on you. They typically will hold their ground, keep their head facing you, and will defend themselves. So you have to be very careful when handling them because of that. So you have to quickly get around back, grab the back end of their shell, and move them. Or sometimes people use a tarp or a rug or something like that to drag them off of the road. When they're in the water, they're almost a different animal. They are less defensive. They know that they have more of the upper hand. They can move a little bit more quickly. And so they're not if you're swimming around and you see a snapping turtle, they're not a big threat to you. They're not going to come after you, and they're just not going to be as defensive. So, but beautiful animal. This particular snapping turtle I took out of a trap. I was trapping for Blanding's turtles, actually, and he showed up in that trap, and he sat there hissing and looking at me for about a half an hour while I was processing the other turtles, and he just really wanted to get a bite of me, but then luckily never happened. All right, so I put in the chat my favorite turtle in New Hampshire is wood turtle. And it's not that this particular species is my favorite, but I really love working with this species in their habitat. So wood turtles are stream turtles, and they prefer streams that are slow moving, very cold, typically sandy, gravelly bottom streams. I think I have a picture here. This is kind of like a classic wood turtle stream where you have sandy point bars, very clear water, large floodplains with dogwood and silver maples. Sometimes farm fields are near these kind of streams. They overwinter in these streams, and so they hibernate in the cooler water. and they can get some oxygen out of the water through tissues in their mouth. But they're just so their habitat is absolutely beautiful, and it's a great place to spend a lot of time. They're definitely more rare. They are statewide, but their habitat is limited. So the type of stream that they need to persist in abundance is rare, and the reasons for that are complicated, but obviously dams and rivers play a part in that. Some agricultural activities near those streams can reduce the number of turtles in the area because they get caught up in haying machinery and things like that. And then, of course, roads and development, which restricts their habitat or increases roadkill. They're a very long-lived species, up to 75 years old, and also very late at sexually maturing. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. And another thing that I'll talk about is the illegal pet trade and international markets for wildlife trade. And wood turtles are sought after in that. They're often caught up in confiscations when we find large amounts of wood turtles that are being shipped overseas, caught in trade ports, being transported from state to state. And it's not just the pet trade, but it is food and medicine in some Asian countries where they've really depleted some of their freshwater turtle species. And a fun little thing about wood turtles is that occasionally you can catch them in a floodplain when they're up on land. They're really looking for slugs and worms. It's kind of like their go-to food source, although they'll eat almost anything, and I'll find them eating mushrooms sometimes. But they'll stomp their front legs down on the leaves and the soil to get critters moving around, worms and slugs and other invertebrates to feed on. And it's pretty fascinating to watch them do that. There's types of birds that will do that, like woodcock. They'll stomp the ground. Pretty fun to see, and you can find those videos on YouTube as well. So I mentioned the grants that we use to fund our work, and so not only are we looking to find the populations that are in need of conservation or the most robust in the state, but we also, once we capture the turtles, we'll put transmitters on them, and we'll follow the turtle around for about 2 years. And the reason we're doing that is to figure out how they're using the landscape, not just the river itself, because they come out of the river in like this time of year, and they rarely go back. They'll spend most of their time moving around, foraging, and then eventually nesting before going back to the rivers in the fall. And so understanding how the turtles are using these landscapes is really important for managing them. Not so, land use practices are important to manage, to reduce the impacts of things like forestry and agriculture, and even development on the habitats that we know they're using. So it's very informative. It's labor intensive because you have to go out 2 days a week minimum to get a location of one individual turtle, and each site will have 10 to 12 turtles, and so that adds up pretty quickly. And then we have like 3 or 4 sites per year. And so we end up with maps like this where we have, we've caught the turtle pretty much like right in the main stem of this small stream. And then we get locations a couple times a week. And so we get to see how far from the stream they're going, what fields they're using, what forests they're using, what roads they're crossing. And then also the long treks that they're making to find nesting habitat. Turtles need open sandy soils to lay their eggs, and sometimes that's not available right near the stream, and so they have to go kind of far to find that. This is another one, same thing, like they kind of all congregate in one area, still moving pretty far, typically they stay within 300 meters of a stream, their home stream, but many will go much farther. And several of them here, you could see, had to cross this road, and they jumped over to another river completely. This happened to be a female that nested over here, and then made her way back. And so there's different things you can do to enhance their upland habitat use by creating nesting habitats in places where they don't have to cross roads. And I'll talk about that too in a little bit. So moving on to the spotted turtle. This is another of my favorites just because they're so beautiful. They don't grow very large. An adult is, maybe 8 inches across. Very long lived, up to 70, 75 years old, despite their small size. But these turtles are in the southern part of the state mostly, most of them in the southeastern part of the state. They rely on wetlands, vernal pools, shrub swamps, fens and bogs, for forested wetlands. And they really need a combination of all those things. So just having a shrub swamp in one area is not enough. They move around and they feed this time of year in those vernal pools where there's tons of frog eggs and salamander eggs, and also larval invertebrates that are swimming around, and they feed on that. So it's an excellent place for them to forage and also meet up with mates. It seems to be a go-to place. Some vernal pools will be permanent from year to year, not every year, but they'll occasionally overwinter in those vernal pools down at the bottom. And then so they wake up in the spring when the ice melts and the frogs start moving in, and there's a buffet right there, continental breakfast waiting for them when they wake up. And so same thing with spotted turtles. We've done intensive monitoring with live traps. And then we've done radio telemetry. So we've put transmitters on them and we've followed them moving around from wetland to wetland. And that's how we know that they're really not just using one type of wetland. They never stay in one wetland. They're always on the move until they go back to hibernation. Same with the Blanding's turtle, the state endangered Blanding's turtle. We have probably more data on Blanding's turtles than any of the species, just because we've had the opportunity to work with them for so long. We've had multiple grants to help us do that. And they're also very well reported by the public. And so we have a lot of people reporting them. And I think the main reason for that is because they're fairly large turtle, pretty striking. They have a high domed shell, striking yellow chin and front of their legs, but they just move around a lot. So they spend time kind of hanging out in the woods, but they'll often cross a trail, the road, go through people's yards, especially during nesting season, which is around late May, early June. And so they have these huge home ranges. So they're just seen more often. Not to mention the fact that the southeastern part of New Hampshire is where all the people are. Most people are. And so there's more people out there to actually observe them. Here's one. Just happened to be crossing a trail as I was making my way down, and there was a vernal pool on this side, and it was making its way to a forested wetland on this side. And pretty common sighting in an area where there's a lot of Blanding's turtles like this one. And so this is the kind of the trapping that we use to find the turtles, and we'll put these traps in a variety of wetlands in a fairly large landscape to get a really good picture of how many are there and what wetland habitats they're using and at what time of year. And so we'll create these plots where we'll put 5 traps in each plot, and we have to check those every day and rebait them with sardines, and then check our traps and process the turtles. We do mark recapture surveys, and so we do a little notch on the outside of their shell that helps us indicate, when we catch another one, and that helps us generate population estimates based on the recapture rate. And we'll do this we'll do 12-night trap events 3 times a year. So we'll do it in the pre-nesting, nesting, and then post-nesting season. And that gives us a good picture of what habitats they're using and at what time of year. And so same thing, we glue these transmitters on them, and we use adhesive that we can pop them off when we're done after 2 years. And we use these silly antennas called Yagis to pick up the signal, their individual frequencies, and then we go and find the turtle, get right to where they are and then track that location. This is an interesting one from Durham, where we had a female that we caught up in a vernal pool, actually in early spring, and then we tracked it through a whole bunch of different wetlands throughout the season. So April to June, and from April to June, this turtle made it about a whole mile to an area in not a residential area necessarily, but a neighborhood. And there was sort of a farm field here where she laid her eggs. And then from June to September, she went all the way back. So she did a 2-mile journey in her active season. That really kind of gave us it illuminated the fact that we really needed to create some nesting habitat that wasn't so far away from their core wetlands, and doesn't necessarily put them in danger of encountering a car when they cross a road, or somebody's dog, or just a human picking one up, or agricultural equipment. And so I'll talk about that in a little bit, because there's some nuance to that. Another state endangered turtle is the eastern box turtle, and this one is one that is just very spotty. So we're on the extreme northern edge of its range. Most of the populations that we have, which we only know of 3 of them right now, but those 3 populations are on the southern part of the state, right along the border. When I first started, we had we found one box turtle that was laying eggs, and we were able to put a transmitter on her, and I've tracked her for a couple years, hoping that I would run into another one, basically, and just never did for 2 years. And then one day I went out there, I found her, and then I turned around and there was another one right behind me. It happened to be a male. And then since then, we've just put more effort into some of these sites, and now we're up to, I think we have 22, 23 of them with transmitters on them right now, and hoping to get more, just to really figure out where they are, define the edges of their core range, and figure out how we can enhance and protect their habitat. They're completely terrestrial. They don't use wetlands much, and so they're relying on forest edges and power lines and fields and things like that. Also highly valued in the pet trade, but good luck finding one in New Hampshire. I mean, they're a needle in a haystack. Again, it took me 2 years actively looking to find number 2. And this is what we have, one with a transmitter on her, following her out to a nice little nesting area down in Hudson, New Hampshire. We have partnered with Zoo New England to help us not only track the turtles, but also identify nesting areas. And we knew, because they were so their populations were so restricted and so small, we knew we were going to have to augment those populations if they stood any chance of survival long term, any persistence. And so Zoo New England helped us collect eggs, and we were able to incubate those eggs for a couple of years in a row in captivity, and then raise them for a year so they're big enough to release back into the wild. The benefit of doing that is that a hatchling box turtle is like a $50 size, and it quickly gets gobbled up by anything from birds to chipmunks to fox to you name it. they have a ton of predators. They're bite size, you know. So we when they're raised in captivity, they're almost double the size that they would be in just normal their normal environment. And so when they're released, their shell is harder, they're larger, they have a greater chance of survival. And so that's been fairly successful. We just have to keep at it, and at the same time really protect those habitats that are available to them. All right, so threats. I've touched on a lot of them, but I really want to dig into them because it's important. So road mortality is number one for turtle threats, as well as other species. But roads were built and constructed in the state before anybody had any real good information about how turtles move, and not knowing that they move from wetland to wetland and they move to nesting areas. And so roads were constructed basically bisecting wetlands, sometimes going right next to wetlands, sometimes going over wetlands. And, turtles, they first showed up in the fossil record about 250 million years ago, and they really haven't changed that much since. Their shell, they have a beak, and their size has changed, but the shell and the body shape is about the same. And they've been able to withstand a whole bunch of threats, predator threats mostly, but also climatic changes and things like that. But evolution doesn't work when it comes to cars on roads. There's just it doesn't you can't keep track with the rate of human innovation. Residential and commercial development is also like a big issue because it fragments and basically destroys their upland habitats and sometimes their aquatic ones as well. You can see in this aerial image here, you have a wetland in the middle of a pretty developed area. There are turtles in there, but they're declining very, very quickly because they're consistently getting hit by cars. They're consistently having unsuccessful nesting forays and reproductive issues, and then it's just reducing their genetic diversity as well. And no new turtles are migrating into this population, so it's really an island. And obviously, the more development you have, the more roads you have, the more cars you have, etc. So collection of turtles is definitely something that's on our radar and is something that seems to be increasing as a threat. They are, and it's not just commercial collection for illegal trade. It can sometimes be as simple as picking up a turtle and taking home for a pet, keeping it in captivity. That turtle, once it's removed from that population, is removed from that population for good. And sometimes people will release a turtle after they've had it for a couple of years, but they typically don't know where that turtle came from or what kind of habitat it needs. And so when they put it back into a lake or pond, say it's a wood turtle like this one, that wood turtle doesn't know what to do with a lake or pond. It can't hibernate in the lake or pond. It's not its usual habitat. And so it needs to leave the area and go find suitable habitat. It needs to find a river or a stream. And in the process, they end up crossing roads and, encountering predators and everything else. And so then that animal is gone. It's gone from the population. And when you have animals that have such a late age sexual maturity, then the removal of an adult reproductive animal has very dire consequences for the population there. The commercial end of things is definitely troubling, and people are going to great lengths to get turtles out of areas where they know that they are and get them out of the country, out of the state, sell them. They'll package them up in all kinds of different ways, like these ones that were found in hamburger wrappers. And again, once they're gone, they're gone. The main reason is the value of them. So an individual wood turtle can get up to $900 if it's a reproductive female. Um, but um, but China and some of the other Southeast Asian countries have really depleted their own freshwater turtle populations, and those populations they relied on for food and traditional medicine. And so without those, they're relying on imports. And these turtles show up in some of those wet markets that you've heard of. Um, and so they're alive when they get there. And then they're quickly distributed into, whatever particular market is interested. And we are seeing confiscations that are happening fairly regularly now. Some of them will be individuals that have up to 400 turtles, native Northeast turtles, trying to get them out of the country. They're getting busted. A lot of times the charges are just getting dropped because it's on the list of priorities. It's coming down, it's coming in at the bottom in a lot of places, and they're sort of running out of time. This particular case in New York, it basically expired, and the person who was charged, or not actually charged, was let off because the case had expired and they never got to hearing it. So that's too bad. And so there's a push to really try to educate the legal system and law enforcement and district judges to take this a little bit more serious. Okay, so all the bad news, that we'll put that behind us now. And I really want to focus on what we can do, what you can do, what's being done, what I need help with, and just sort of dig into that. So above all else, land protection is critical. So, like that site I showed you earlier with the development all around it, once it's gone, it's gone, unless humans are, gone, but it's gone. So we need to protect it. And so, everything really comes down to conversion of their habitat to residential and commercial development. Like, and with that comes all what I have listed here: increase in road traffic, just the fragmentation of their actual habitats and the stress that causes them, and then the human wildlife interface, that interaction at the fringes, at the edges, and increased subsidized predation. Subsidized predators are like raccoons. They're the animals that basically explode near human populations and epicenters. And so, like, raccoons are specialists at finding turtles, but particularly finding turtle nests and eating the eggs. They're excellent at it. We work with a lot of land trusts and towns and agencies to we're not the Fish and Game Department doesn't have money to buy land, but we can help the process and help prioritize certain landscapes for conservation. So roadkill, again, is a really big issue. And so a couple of years back, we worked with UNH and DES and the EPA to create a guidance document for how to reduce risks to Blanding's turtles in specifically, but also can apply to all these other species as well. So this particular document will it'll discuss the how to assess these wetland crossings or river crossings, and highlight some of the things that are bad, like this perched culvert where a turtle can't actually go through there because it's so high up. And so they need to go up and over the road. And that's typically what we see. Where this one's a better situation where it's got a natural bottom and it's wide. There's more daylight going in there, and more likely that a turtle's going to go through there and successfully get to the other side without going over the road. And so this document, and it's on our website, the link is there. And again, this whole presentation can be shared as a PDF after the fact. but it discusses, what an appropriate openness ratio of that culvert is, which is partially for like the amount of daylight that can get in there. So a turtle does not want to go into a small 12-inch dark hole, because inside a dark 12-inch hole could be a raccoon waiting for him or her. And so they want to see what they're going into. And so it's just going to entice them to actually use it. There's also things that can be done like funnel fencing, where the fencing goes along the road and ends at the crossing or the culvert. So it sort of forces the turtles to find their way through the culvert and not up over the road. That's pretty critical. Other things like wildlife shelves inside the tunnel can help, because like some turtles are moving through the water, but others are moving, as you've seen, through the landscape, and they may be more interested in staying on land than going into the water. And so having a perched shelf inside that culvert might help them actually get through it without going over the road. And then the substrate inside the culvert, the bottom, making sure that it's natural, or at least something that resembles something natural and not just smooth plastic or concrete or something like that. And then there's other considerations in there as well. It is kind of a technical document, but it really does give you the tools if you're a town looking to upgrade a crossing, and there happens to be a turtle population there, or an area where there's documented roadkill. So nesting habitat, as I mentioned, is very limited in a lot of the core populations that we have. So most of the turtles are using either old sand and gravel pits, or they're using, the edge of somebody's driveway, mulch pile, roadsides, sometimes just even somebody's lawn. Not the best places for a turtle to be. Not for the adult, and certainly not for the hatchlings or even the eggs in there. And so the reason why the habitat itself is so limited is because the lack of disturbance on the landscape. So, we've gone through periods since the Ice Age where there was lots of sand and deposits from the glaciers receding, and allowed for a lot of open areas for turtles to use for nesting. And then after that, it was like blowdown events, hurricanes, things that opened up forests, and or floods that washed material into certain areas. It was just a little bit more dynamic than it is today. And New Hampshire has really gone into a very forest-dominated state, and has a lot of those nesting areas have just overgrown. So what do? We have to basically go in and find where the turtles are. And in our case, we know where they are, and we know that this is a limited resource. So we bring in sand. But many times it's not just bringing in sand. Sometimes you have to cut down an area of the woods to put the sand into. And so this can be very expensive, doing it, like from a state agency. We have to go through all the different checklists in order to make things happen on either state land, town land, private land. But it's also something that homeowners can do. So, and I'm going to talk about some incentives for that. But some people, like, this is my yard, and I happen to have one section of my yard where there's a whole bunch of sand just under like all this grass. There's blue stem grasses and things like that. And so I got out there with my old tractor and just scraped away the grass and opened up a whole big area of this field area for turtles to nest. And so I live in an area where we have Blanding's turtles and spotted turtles, as well as all the others. And now they use that area for nesting, and they don't have to travel far. They don't have to cross a road. And so if you got an old tractor, pretty easy to do. Not easy to do by hand, although I've done some of that, but the tractor makes it pretty easy. And so for me, Um, I don't have like tons of money when I work for a state agency. Um, and so I worked with the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is part of the USDA. They have programs that will incentivize you to do work for turtles, but all different types of wildlife, at-risk species. Could be pollinators, could be birds, some mammals, but particularly like turtles, they have programs available that will help you. And so one of them is creating nesting habitat. Another one could be creating buffers on your field so that there's an area for turtles to hang out that isn't going to get mowed during the peak season. And so that can help protect at least a core part of that population. Creating openings in your forest to create early successional habitat. That's important for turtles because they're moving through the landscape, and if it's very forested, it limits the amount of sun they can get, and sun is really important for a reptile and for a turtle in particular. And so openings are good. It also provides different types of food resources when you have a variety of different habitats in the uplands. And then changing the timing of things. So if you mow your field every year or something like that, or till it, changing the timing to either early spring or late fall it can save a lot of turtles if there's a lot in the area. And again, they'll pay you for reducing some of those activities. And so you can contact me if you're interested in some of these incentives and some of these programs. You can contact your local NRCS office and they can have a planner come and look at it with you. Most of the time, if it's turtle related, they're going to contact me anyway, and I'll go out and help out. I provide technical assistance to them on a regular basis. But it's some good stuff, and I definitely recommend checking it out. And so the other thing is, and Dallas and Drew from New Hampshire Turtle Rescue are amazing people. They've dedicated their lives to rehabilitating turtles, mostly turtles hit on roadways, but it could be other things, turtles found with illnesses or whatever, picked up by pets. And if you find an injured turtle on a roadway, I should say, if you find an injured turtle and it's a wood, Blandings, spotted, or eastern box turtle, contact them and they're gonna be able to get that turtle from you either through a volunteer network or them themselves, or they'll get me involved. But getting these turtles rehabilitated and back into the wild is critical. And they're just a huge help. So contact them if you find one, even if you don't know if it's injured or not. Sometimes, turtles can appear okay after they've been clipped by a car or something, but they're pretty stoic, and so you may not know that they could have a pretty substantial injury that should be checked out. You can also contact them about all the other species of turtles as well, and they'll figure out where that turtle should go. They can't take all of them, but we have other rehabbers who can help pick up that slack. And then reporting. And so Brett mentioned reporting. And not just reporting individual species, but vernal pools are really important, especially for Blandings and spotted turtles. They're underreported wetlands because they're overlooked very easily because they're seasonal. Sometimes they're just a little pocket in the woods somewhere, but we can't know where every vernal pool is. There are excellent tools out there for helping us, like LiDAR, which can show like low areas in the woods through remote sensing, but even at that, we don't know if there's water in them. So reporting vernal pools that are on your property is going to help identify areas where we may have turtles. Just to end things, so the non-game program, as I mentioned, is a little bit different than the rest of the agencies and programs in New Hampshire Fish and Game in that we get very, very tiny amount of money from the general fund. So the state budget. So most of our money to do our work is coming from federal grants, moose plate money, and then private donations. So those are the big three. So if you have a moose plate, thank you. If you donate, thank you. If you do donate, you get our Wildlines newsletter 4 times a year. But these grants are critical. We don't know what's going to happen with grants in the future. Time will tell. Hopefully, we'll continue to get our state wildlife grants. But if not, we're going to have to really rely on donations and other sources of income. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brett and whoever and take any questions that you have. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was really excellent. And there's lots of links in the chat, which we'll send out also as a follow-up email to everyone. It is 6:30, so if you need to run, you can, that's okay. But if those of you are able to stay, there were tons of questions. If we can stay for a few minutes and maybe get to some of them, if that's okay with you, Josh.
Oh, yeah. Sorry I went so long.
Well, no, it was technical difficulties. It happens to everyone. I'll start with a few that I wrote down. I'm sorry we won't get to everybody's question probably, but one question that I hear a lot from other folks about reporting is, do you get, and Kirsten too, do you get sightings data from iNaturalist? Would you like, what should people do with iNaturalist and turtles?
So iNaturalist is great. And we need to find a way to get their data into our database. And so right now it's not coming to us directly. We have to harvest it, and we don't have a person dedicated to that, and it can be very cumbersome. The reason why it needs to come to us is because if it's just sitting with iNaturalist, it's great to have that reported, but it doesn't give us the information we need to, to identify some of these populations, but also to inform environmental review, both through us and New Hampshire DES. And so Blanding's turtles or spotted turtles or any of the listed turtles will trigger a review from us if there's a large development project happening or something like that. So that's really important that we have that, so we can help in the guidance of that development project that isn't going to harm that many turtles.
And I know there's also concerns when you were talking about the poaching or people taking turtles. The listed species, I think their locations are automatically obscured by iNaturalist so that people can't just go out and find them. But the non-listed species, that's not true. So there's some concern, I would imagine, about making these locations public through a public platform like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a bunch of people have asked questions about protecting turtle nests from predators. And is there anything that people can do? Should they do that? Are there resources for that?
Sure. So I'd say if you know for sure that a turtle laid its eggs in an area, just say in your yard, you can protect that nest carefully with like a wire cage or something. You can use hardware cloth or chicken wire. You do have to kind of bury it into the ground a little bit, because raccoons with those little hands will just grab it, fling it off. But I will say that what you're doing is you're protecting those nests from a predator like a raccoon. But after a week or two, the scent associated with the eggs being laid in the ground is typically gone. And so after a couple weeks, you can take that cage off of the nest and just let it do what it's going to do. The reason why I typically don't want people to keep that cage on there throughout the duration of the season is because the hatchlings can come out when you're not home, and they can be trapped in there, and then they can be eaten by a predator, or they can overheat, desiccate, dehydrate, and die in there. And I've seen that happen. And so it's really that early, like, 1 or 2 weeks, protect it if you want, and if you if you're so inclined, and then take it off. Predation of nest is definitely not the #1 threat, but in some areas it can be elevated, and it's definitely worth doing it. And I would if done right, I think it's a great action to take.
Excellent. We do that in my yard. We have the painted turtles nesting in the lawn, and we do protect their nests when we can find them. They're very cryptic and hard to see unless you see the turtle actually digging the nest because they're so well hidden after they go away. But
Exactly.
another question is about other turtles not native to New Hampshire and their impact on native turtles, particularly red-eared sliders. Is there anything that you can anything you want to share about that?
Yeah. So they're luckily not overabundant. They're not competing with native species, with the exception of maybe a couple spots in the state. But what they are doing is potentially introducing diseases, because turtles that you get from a pet store and then release into the wild typically or commonly will have some sort of virus, bacterial infection, fungal infection that could be spread to wild populations. And that's going to be really bad, because then once it's in the system, it's going to be there indefinitely. But you can report red-eared sliders, yellow-bellied sliders, any non-native turtles, report them, because we do want to keep track of those and how successful those populations are becoming in some parts of the state.
Excellent. I'm trying to skim through. There were so many. The mark of a good presentation is how many questions there are, and there's a ton. So well done. I know we won't get to them all, but one that we hear kind of a lot at the Harris Center. So there's a lot of talk about helping turtles across roads in the direction that they're going. But we get questions about at the Harris Center about what about hatchling turtles? Do you just move them across roads? Someone was asking, should we bring them to water if they're not near water? Do you simply move them across the road the same as you would an adult in search of a nest site?
Good question. So, yeah, hatchling turtles, I would say the same thing. I wouldn't necessarily put them. So, a lot of times people pick them up and bring them to the side of a lake or a pond. The problem with that is that you put them in there, and a largemouth bass will eat a little baby turtle in a heartbeat, among other fish species. I suggest you take that hatchling turtle in the direction it was headed. Typically, hatchling turtles will be going downhill. It's called positive geotaxis. They will follow gravity down because down means water. And so get them off the road and maybe take them a little bit farther than you would like a really big snapping turtle or something like that, and head them in the direction of downhill towards water, but don't just throw them in a river or a pond or something like that. I let them use the periphery. They like little tiny like pockets of water that you wouldn't even necessarily consider a turtle to use, but they like those, and they'll stay there for months, until they make their way into a larger water body.
Excellent. I think since it's 6:40, I think that's a good way to end with a hopeful picture of little baby turtles making their way into shallow waters. But we thank everyone for coming, and thanks, Josh. This was incredibly informative, and I hope that you have just inspired a whole new group of turtle protectors out there, and that some of you will come and join us for our next Zoom on May 13th, where you can learn how to take it to the next step and be a turtle transport volunteer for New Hampshire Turtle Rescue, because as Josh has shared with us, every turtle counts, and we can all make a difference in helping them survive here in the Granite State. So thank you so much, Josh, and thank you everyone for joining us, and hope to see you in a few weeks.
Thank you all very much.